Well, the book is in two parts, and the first part is a journey along the northeast coast from the Durham coalfield area up to Berwick-upon-Tweed, and it's a journey through many different communities and through human history, and it's also a journey through a much deeper history and the geological past of that coast. Then the second part of the book is quite different at first glance, because it's mostly arranged around two sequences of poems which were written in collaboration with scientists. And the first of those is about robotics and remote sensing and artificial intelligence. And then the second of the sequences in part two is all about how methods such as remote sensing are used by scientists to investigate the landscape of Antarctica under the ice, and therefore the movement of ice over very long time periods. So it has bearing on climate change. So the two parts of the book, although quite different at first glance, I feel resonate with each other because they're dealing with transition and change and big time scales, and where the human fits into those things. So they're dealing with continuity and also with extinctions of things like cultures and languages in minute, very small local places, and also on a very big scale. So it's sort of macro and micro. I've obviously been very inspired by the scientists who I've worked with directly, and by the collaborators with whom I've worked with a number of radio producers and composers. I work with sound a lot. So many of the poems in the collection were commissioned for a specific purpose, to be heard, really, to be heard out loud. They're all meant to be heard out loud. But I think throughout my life, really, my poetry inspirations have been the communities that inform the poems. So when I write about East Durham, the inspiration are the voices of people that I hear in East Durham. And when I'm writing about Northumberland, where I've lived for much of my adult life, it's the communities there that I've spoken to. And I feel I hope in the poems, there's sort of layer upon layer of those voices in the poem. So I feel like I'm a sort of translator between the places that I write about and whoever is hearing the poems. And hopefully people in the places I write about hear them in different contexts. I think I probably am more inspired by a long tradition of folk balladry, really, than I am by directly page poets, although there are many poets in my lifetime who've influenced me and who I admire. But I feel that my method of working probably comes from an older tradition of song, really, of balladry and song. The book's called Rhizodont because the rhizodont is a fossil fish that was found on the North Northumberland coast some years ago, and it is in the Carboniferous strata from about 330 million years ago. And it's significant because it belongs to a family of fish that they were called Sarcopterygians, which means fleshy-finned. And what that means is that over the course of many millions of years, they came up out of the water onto land. And that process happened several times over in several branches of the family. But it was a very significant moment in evolution, because that was really the first time that creatures had done that. And all quadrupeds, including us, all four-limbed creatures, are descended from Sarcopterygians. And I wanted that fish to be a kind of metaphor, really, for a moment of transition in a rather light-hearted way. I call the poem #Rhizodont rather than just Rhizodont, because it seems to me a sort of metaphor for a moment of when our own species is moving from a very embodied life as kind of animals on this planet to a species which has for the first time delegated agency outside ourselves to artificial intelligence. And that's a really extraordinary moment, I think, in our evolution. We cannot know where that's going to lead us, but I just wanted to kind of make people think about that in a kind of broad historical sense. Not only what we're doing to the planet, but also what technology is doing to us. It's completely astonishing to me to be nominated for this prize. I live in quite a remote part of the country in North Northumberland, and unlike most poets, I don't work within an institution. I'm not attached to a university or anything like that. And I've at times, I felt quite isolated, really, from the sort of literary world, although I think many poets feel that because it's just part of being a poet, really. But to have an acknowledgement like this and a validation like this is truly extraordinary, because I've long felt that my audience is a kind of slightly more general audience, not really a literary audience. You know, if I write for radio or if I write for a local festival or a local audience, it's not quite the same thing as writing for a poetry audience as such. So to be nominated for this prize is extraordinary and absolutely wonderful, and I am so grateful. I really am.